Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to today's webinar. I'm Josh Jones and today's topic is adapting to change, understanding today's job seekers. I'm joined by Kevin Grossman and Darren Finley, and they will be leading today's discussion. But before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping items. I want to bring your attention to the chat feature at the right-hand side of your screen. The chat feature is great for general discussion. But if you have questions for Darren or Kevin today, please try to use the Q&A tab, which is kind of located in the same area. Today's webinar is being recorded, and by the end of the day today, you will receive an email from us with a link to the playback, and you'll be able to watch it at your convenience. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand things off to these gentlemen. I'm going to turn off my camera and my mic, but I'll be watching from the sidelines.
Hey, Joshua, before we take over, we have folks saying that they can't hear. So do you have a triage for them?
Yep, 1 second. Let's see. If you're, explaining with audio will not help.
Right. So do you want to write in the chat? Do they need to refresh their screen? Are they on?
Yeah, I got it. I will take over from here. And if you need anything else, I'm on the sidelines.
You got it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a great webinar ahead from Darren Finley from Engage to Excel. Darren, it's like the old days. We're back together again. And we're excited to see your presentation. Before we do that, and as everybody's refreshing, why don't you tell us where you're at today? We're going to give it about a minute or so before we dive into the rest of the presentation. But why don't you tell us in chat where you're at? And I meant for that to rhyme. I'm actually I'll write it in here. I'm in Santa Cruz, California. I'd always like to see where everybody's at today. Ohio. So let us know. Chicago, nice, near Portland, Alabama, Tennessee. Are you in Tennessee, Darren?
I am, Franklin, Tennessee.
That's right. Bowling, Ohio, Southern California. Look at all those places. Great. Thanks, everybody. Let us know where you're at in the chat, and we'll get started in less than a minute. So we appreciate you being here today. Just while you're telling us where you're at, I just want to briefly introduce Darren Finley, who's the president of Recruitment Solutions at Engage to Excel. Darren, how you doing today?
Doing great, Kevin. Good to be back with you again.
Yeah. So the way we're going to do this, folks, and thanks for telling us where you're at. Pennsylvania, Carlsbad, we've got folks all over the place. Charleston, lovely place. There you go. I have yet to go to Detroit. I've got to get there. Minneapolis, actually going there tonight for a workshop I'm running this week. So that'll be fun. As we're presenting, as Darren's presenting, I'm here just to kind of keep the thing moving. If you've got questions for Darren at any point throughout his presentation, please post them in the Q&A portion of the dashboard that you see in big marker. You can post them in the chat too, but we prefer you do it in the Q&A. Just easier to manage that way, but we'll all be monitoring both. So if you've got a question in the moment, I want to make sure to get it to Darren in that moment, and we'll take them, and we won't wait till the end. So just feel free to ask them as they come about, and love it. Everybody telling us where they're at. So I think, Darren, we're going to go ahead and get started then, and I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about adapting to change, understanding today's job seekers. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. And Darren, take it away, and I'll be here in the back.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Joshua. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to talk about adapting to change today. And just appreciate everybody kind of showing up. And again, always appreciate your questions and understanding where you are. Joshua had asked us to do a quick, short commercial on Engage to Excel and who we are. So if you don't know who we are, Engage to Excel is a human capital management company, and we are really focused on helping organizations find and keep their top talent. And so everything that we do, whether it's recruiting, whether it's onboarding, whether it's recognizing individuals from length of service, performance recognition, to safety recognition, social recognition. Our CSX Develop really focuses on helping managers become better leaders and better at recognizing and much more employee-centric, have specific training around that, as well as our survey group that does engagement surveys. And so our recruiting side really focuses on a couple of things. One, we do RPO, we do executive search and professional search. We do labor market analysis overall. And so we really just try to think about how can we help organizations really find and keep top talent across their organizations. And we've been around for 132 years, but we are constantly evolving. As you can imagine, being around all you've got to continually evolve to the market and the needs of organizations overall. Each one of the things you see across the screen, whether it's recruiting or onboarding or recognition, have both a service delivery component. We have individuals that are focused on taking great care of our clients, but also a software component to what we do to enable our technology stack kind of across the board. So Engage Excel is here to kind of help you with anything you need to help find or keep. That's my 90-second commercial. But what we really want to get to today is understanding and adapting to change. And if you look back over the last several years, we'll talk about the labor market in just a second, but there has been just an upheaval in the workforce today and the things that are going on around job seekers, what they're looking for, whether it's side gigs, remote work, why employees leave, why they stay, why they accept offers. We're going to look at all of those things today and the impact that onboarding has. And we'll talk about, kind of how we've done that the last several years and perceptions on the recruiting process as well. And some of those have changed, interestingly, over the last several years, and some of them have not. And we'll talk about those. And the intent for me today really is to give you some good, solid data, some research that we've done to help you craft your program. And as you know, with our work with the candies in the past and with ERE, we're very focused on creating great candidate experiences. And so I think all of this data will help you think through that and understand, what you can do in your own organization to create a great candidate experience and to develop a really strong workforce overall. But as you think about this labor market that we're in a very dynamic labor market, and almost all the major industry groups today are back to pre-pandemic employment levels. So when you go back and look at 19, 18, 17, 2019, 18, 17, we are basically back up to where we were in each of those industry categories. May was an exceptionally strong month. We actually added 272,000 jobs in the month of May, and that just exceeded every single estimate by top economists. And what we've also seen is that this deceleration in hiring, it didn't ever stop, but it certainly decelerated from 21 to 22 to the very first part of 23. That has now basically stopped. And we have seen a very slight acceleration again in the number of jobs and the number of hiring that occurred month over month. That's a couple of things that we'll talk about in just a second that is driving that. Also, at the same time, interestingly enough, the unemployment rate ticked up to 4%, and it ended the longest stretch of this historically low unemployment we've had for 50 years, and it matched the highest level. 4% is the highest level we've had since January of 22. So over 2 years is the last time we saw a 4% unemployment rate. And if you remember back pre-pandemic, it was hovering somewhere between 3.5 and 3.8% unemployment. So when you compare again, pre-pandemic to post-pandemic to kind of where we are today, we are in a new territory. And I think what you'll hear me talk about several times today, and again, this is my opinion on it, this is we started seeing renorming occur last year, and so we're trying to find out what that new normal is going to be. I think we're getting closer to what that new normal may be. That being said, the labor market report is a mixed bag of data suggesting both the soft landing is still possible, but also that higher unemployment may be needed to come along to tame inflation, because inflation is stubbornly still hanging on, although it's gotten a lot lower overall. We look at wage growth. It certainly has been 0.4% wage growth in the month of May. It's running around 4% annualized over the last 3 months. And if you look at the last trending of the last year, or really the last about 16 months, it's really stabilized at about a 4% annualized rate of wage growth. So you go back 3 years or 3.5 years, you had some of that, 5, 6, 7, even 9% increase in wages in some months right after the pandemic, when it got kind of crazy and they start hiring again. And so it's just interesting to see how that wage growth has kind of stabilized in the last 16 months, varying just a little bit each month. The number of jobs remained open at 8.1 million. And again, if you go back to the several years after the pandemic, we were talking about 12 million open jobs. So there's 4 million less jobs open today than there were 2 years ago. That's a huge impact in the overall job seekers' perception, in the overall hiring managers' perception, and organizations' perception around what the competition is out there. And it's true, with 4 million less open jobs, the labor market is a little tighter than it was before. And so that's just been interesting to kind of watch that number. And pre-pandemic, by the way, it was around 7.5 million open jobs. So we're almost back to that number when you think about 2019. Labor force participation rate dropped down to 62.7% from 62.5 from 62.7. So that is a little bit of a drop overall. And there's some things around immigration that has caused some of that. But on the positive side, what we're seeing is the prime age working population, those between 25 years old and 54 years old, rose to its highest level in 22 years. So 83.6% of folks are working today. So Americans love to work. The immigrants that come in love to work as well. So that's a real positive thing for our productivity and for our workforce overall. And I think you have all of that kind of going on. So it's a very dynamic market. At the same time, you've got, in 2016, there were 49 million people aged 65 and older in the United States. Call it 50 million people, right? By the time we roll around to 2030, which is just a few years, 6 more years, that number is expected to go up to 73 million. So it's a 58% increase in the number of individuals who are over 65. And I think some other dynamics we'll see in the workforce is how they continue to work and how they maybe don't retire as soon, or maybe they take part-time jobs and things like that. So the labor market impacts in 2024 are interesting, and we looked at the forecast overall, and really for the past year, every month's report has some kind of revision going on, right? They'd say one number, then they revise it, mostly up. Very few times they revised it down, but it certainly has exceeded expectations overall. Our friends over at Labor IQ have already upped their 2024 forecast from 1.9 million jobs added to 1.9. It was 1.4, so they've upped up another 500,000 jobs already this year. And so the problem with the strong labor markets is going to make it harder to curb inflation. It's going to lead to higher interest rates for longer and fewer Fed cuts, and the interest rate along the way. So that causes angst around changing jobs. That causes angst about buying homes and things like that. So that has an impact in the psyche and the way people behave in the market overall. And then I also think that it depends on the segment of the labor market that you're in. Not all segments of the market have found it to be as strong as others. Healthcare certainly is still a very, very strong segment of the labor market. IT experienced several layoffs at the beginning of the year, so they're still trying to kind of find their path and find their way in this year overall. So a soft landing is in sight, but some are still questioning, if the labor market keeps going as strong as it is and we all keep spending like we're spending, evidently that's keeping inflation up pretty high. So anyway, a lot of jobs being added. Overall, hiring continues to accelerate overall. When you think about the months going on, January was one of the 2 lowest months of job gains, and it's just gone up since then. Also interesting, when you think about January, the Wall Street Journal survey of economists forecasted the labor market would add fewer than 800,000 new jobs in the whole year. So think about that. In January, we were saying it's going to be a tough year. We're only going to add about 800,000 jobs. But guess what? We added 800,000 jobs in the first 3 months of the year at 829,000. So there's a lot of jobs that we continue to add. So the good news for job seekers is that we'll continue to see these upward revisions and opportunities for them to find roles in the U.S. today. As I talked earlier about the wage growth, I think that's going to continue to go around 4%, maybe even at the end of the year, may tick down a little bit to 3.5%, but wages are still growing at a pace that a lot of folks may not have expected overall. And then, of course, unemployment has remained historically low overall. we do see that voluntary turnover has remained a little bit elevated when you compare it to pre-pandemic overall. When you look at how that has occurred, so you look back at turnover, it really is kind of normalizing this year, and it's projected to be 3.3 monthly quits. So every month, about 3.3 million people changing jobs, compared to 3.2 million that were changing jobs before the pandemic. So that may or may not sound like a lot, but during and after the pandemic, we had 4 million quits every single month. And so like, oh, the great resignation, right? We had 800,000 more people changing jobs in 21, 22, and 23 than we're seeing this year. So that's a big slowdown in the number of individuals that are changing jobs and making the turn. I think inflation also is going to continue to cause individuals to make decisions based on what they think that's going to be. So whether it gets below 3% this summer, I think they pushed it back now that they don't think it's going to hit down to the 2.5 or 2.7 probably till December. And we've got an election this year as well. So there's all eyes on inflation, all eyes on consumer spending, all eyes on what's going on in the labor market. Somebody told me yesterday that they had seen something on like the Today Show talking about the labor market and the unemployment rate. So guess what, everyone? Our everyday work that we do around the labor market and labor market analytics and hiring and recruiting and workforce has gone prime time. It's made it to the morning news now on the Today Show. So I just think that this shows the importance of the dynamics that we have in the labor market today. And from a recession standpoint, it looks very unlikely, knock on wood, cross our fingers. And we believe that too, that because it was a election year, that no one was going to really try to do anything to mess up the economy, right? And so we believe that the chance of and then a recession this year is down significantly from what it was. And so the optimistic outlook is this result of this continuing strength in the job report, inflation continuing to be, under control for the next several months. And we just think this normalization to this new normal is going to be where we're at overall by the end of the year. So I tell you all that just to kind of set the stage for what's going on in the labor markets and what it is that we're going to talk about today. And the research that we've done, where our Trendicator research group does this, that's headed up by Dr. Jack Wiley. He's our chief data scientist. And since 2017, we've surveyed job seekers. And the survey is a broad survey intentionally across all the major industries. And it's pretty equally divided between male and female. And there's 1,500 participants. And it really only has a very small, I think 1.5% variance in the outcome. So it's a very accurate, reliable data that you can take back to you and your teams to think about, what you're going to do with your candidate pools and what's going on in the labor market and what job seekers are really preferring overall. This year, we had about 58% who are actually actively looking for jobs and 42% who are not actively looking. We call those passive candidates. So you hear me talk about active and passive candidates. And so it wasn't completely evenly split, but 58% active, 42% passive. And across all tenures in the roles, pretty evenly distributed, as you can see. When compared to last year, we have the same distribution of approximately 49% were less than 4 years in their role. And so that highly correlates with the Great Resignation. And we can see a slight uptick, interestingly, in the 10 plus category, which is also indicative of the slowdowns and the quits that you're seeing across the board. So a really good cross-section of demographics of what job seekers are, who they are. And I guess I'd need to stop and say thanks again to Dr. Jack Wiley, our marketing team, Melissa and Kathleen and Mark Felton and Leslie mentioned, and everyone who put this report together for us and does it every year. Just appreciate so much the hard work that goes into this research and analyzing the data that comes in. It is a ton of data. And when this is over, if you don't actually have the report, would like the full report, I'm happy to send that out to anyone who would need it overall. One of the things we initiated last year was a question on side gigs, and it was a hot topic last year and really somewhat the year before. So we added it into our survey. And I feel like I've heard less about side gigs this year than I did last year, but it's just interesting to me to see that in reality, there was no real change in the respondents when they answered like 44% say yes, I have a side gig, and 56% say no. And that's the exact same response we got last year as well. I just found that fascinating because it had no change when you hear so much about it, you know, in the media. And I hadn't heard much about it this year, so didn't know what to expect. But 81% say the number of hours they're working on their side gig has shifted a little bit. So those working 20 hours or less per week, from 78% working down to 74%. So a slight decrease in the number that are working a few hours, but there was a slight increase in those that are working 21 to 30 hours. So it went from 12% up to 14%, and the 31 plus hours went up from 9 to 12. So it's just interesting that the largest segment that is working a side gig is still working that 10 to 20 hours per week. And I think a lot of reasons behind that could be, you know, things that are like they're getting better at their side gig, they're getting more efficient at their side gig. They've chosen to really not just do it as a side gig, but something more permanently. And so they're working more hours at that overall.
Hey, Darren. Darren?
Yes.
Real quick. So are you going to will you share the deck? I guess was my question. I know we're recording this now. Can you make the deck available too for those? Is that something we can do?
Absolutely. Happy to do that.
Yeah, because somebody was just commenting a lot of great information. I just a quick comment and just relating it to our Candy benchmark data that we're still capturing for this year for 2024. That just to kind of I think underscore some of the things that you highlighted, that you know with the 4 million less jobs that are in the market today compared to in the past, it's definitely a more difficult candidate market. It's not the candidate market it was. Even for resilient industries, but resentment as we measure it. So candidates that are like, I will never do anything with you, the employer, again, because I had a really bad experience. Resentment's higher than we've ever seen in the 13 years that we've been doing this. It is there's a lot of frustration right now out there on the candidate side. Anyway, just more of a comment than a question for you. But
no, that's an interesting comment. And I think one of the things you'll see as we go through this, Kevin, is that a lot of our data just kind of demonstrates the same trends from a job seeker standpoint. But at the very end, one of the things I'm excited to share is the relationship aspect and what you can do to reduce some of those frustrations. So I appreciate you bringing that up because I'm looking forward to sharing that here.
Sure.
In a few minutes. Yep, that's good stuff.
Darren, I've gone ahead and added the slide deck to the handouts. Anybody that's in the audience, if you don't see the slide deck in the handouts, you might want to refresh your screen, but it should be available in the handouts. If some of you could please just confirm in the chat that you're able to access that, that would help. Thanks.
Thanks, Joshua.
Yep, cool. So I think when you look at the second thing we looked at was side gigs. The other thing we looked at was remote work. And just interestingly, you know, around 43% state that they're working remote today, at least 40% of the time. And that's kind of contrast with 45% last year. So a little less than last year, but not a huge return to office phenomenon that we keep hearing about or keep expecting. And anecdotally, I see a lot of hybrid situations continuing versus a strict mandate to return. And the strict mandates get a lot of publicity and make it to the news, but in reality, there's still a lot of hybrid that are out there. We asked a new question this year around the 4-day work week. Scary question for a lot of people, but shockingly, I'm sure you're not shocked, but 80% of the respondents said they are in favor of a 4-day work week, and 20% were not in favor. So I just thought that was just a nice question to start asking to begin to see what the sentiment is around the 4-day work week from a data and statistical standpoint. It is important to note that we didn't add any stipulations to the question, whether it's the same pay or less pay, whether it was 4 10s or just 32 hours. So either way, we just asked the question around, you know, would you be interested in doing a favor of a 4-day work week? And there's a lot that are. So we'll expand on that, I think, this next year. But not a big surprise, you know, managing the work-life challenges while working at home remains part of the greatest challenge expressed last year. And it's gone up slightly from 58% last year to 61% this year. At-home distractions stayed about the same, 36 versus 37. But the most notable increase that we saw was an increase in managing mental health issues. And that's up to 28% this year versus 21% last year. So as an HR or an operations leader or someone that has the ability to impact that, we've got to continue to examine how we view flexibility, how we view working from home, how we view the hybrid workforce, how we view isolation if you're working from home, and help provide tools for the effective remote work overall and support those employees who may be struggling with mental health issues overall. But the state of remote work is still strong overall. Like I said, 43% of the workforce say they are working remote at least 40% of the time. When you look at why employees are leaving, and we've been asking this question for a long time, and you can see that the most important questions that we ask are, why would they leave? And compensation and lack of recognition, appreciation, and respect continue to be the top two reasons why people are willing to leave. We also continue to see concern about work conditions and concern about job security to be one of the top three reasons, kind of going back and forth. But we've always heard that people leave managers, not companies, and I think all of these can be related back to the quality of the manager and employee relationships. In 2023, work conditions was also included around inflexible hours or high stress or interpersonal relationship with coworkers, but it's been replaced this year and back again with job security. Not surprising when you have less available jobs that are open and a little bit higher and slightly higher unemployment rate. But that dynamic labor market impacts job seekers' perception. At the end of the day, fair and equitable compensation and lack of recognition, appreciation, respect are management attributes that can impact why employees stay and why they leave overall. So having managers understand how to be very employee-centric in their day-to-day lives are critical to keeping your employees engaged, productive, and willing to exert that discretionary effort.
Hey, Darren.
Yep.
Question for you relates to this data you're sharing, and we are referencing those who said they're still working remotely, which seemed high to me. I think you said 43%, but my question is, with the return to work mandate, is that on the list of reasons why employees are also leaving? Is that low on the list? Is it more a media blowing this up kind of a thing? Because it's been a point of contention, right, for a lot of employees, and return to work is still a mandate that we're hearing wisps of. Yep. So how does that figure into this? And is that part of the data?
It is part of the data, but interestingly, Kevin, it's very, very low percentage, single digit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, single digit still. So again, because it's very broad based, a lot of the ones that were impacted by that were Silicon Valley and IT and the banking sector.
Sure.
Were highly impacted because it's broader. We may not be getting, the full impact of those specific industries. But it's a great question. I actually have Dr. Jack go back and look and see if that kind of breaks out by industry anywhere. Can we see that driving turnover in any specific industry? So great question. So when we think about, and Kevin had mentioned, that employee experience and the level of individuals who, resent, or is that the right word, Kevin? Resent? I'm trying to double check myself, right? In the process itself. But when you look at the data on why candidates accept offers, we have continued to see the same three reasons around recognition, appreciation, and respect has been the number one reason both before and after COVID. Fair compensation staying really strong at number two, and job fit is firmly in the number three position. When we first began reviewing this data, I was thinking, well, so what, right? There's no big changes, nothing here to see, let's move along. But as we reflected a little bit longer on, we realized that the fact that it has not changed, the fact that there's been very little variance year over year, really does make this a cornerstone of your candidate experience, and why you should focus on both creating or crafting an experience that focuses on the top three reasons why your candidates that are so hard to find many times will accept an offer. I also think that you have to be compelling in all three of these areas. So it's not just okay to show great recognition and appreciation, but be a below market payer, as an example, or have great above market pay, but have a terrible candidate experience or a poor job fit. So I think what you can do is look at these three things and go, you know what? Recognition, appreciation, and respect, fair compensation, and job fit are three pillars of your candidate attraction strategy that are going to create the best outcomes for you long term. And that goes right into why candidates actually reject offers as well. At the same time, we analyze all those reasons, and we get a lot of the same reasons overall. And we've consistently seen lack of recognition as a big reason why they don't accept an offer. The number one factor, as a matter of fact. But then concern about the compensation, job security, job fit have varied over the years in a position of importance. But again, these three pillars in your candidate approach will greatly impact the likelihood of success in converting those hard sought after candidates into the new hires that you need. So when it comes to getting job seekers and our candidates over the finish line, we need to keep in mind why they accept or reject offers. And recognition, appreciation, respect are number one reason why they accept offers, as that's shown throughout the process, the recruiting process. The experience they receive from the recruiters and the hiring managers and the coordinators also has a big influence. Hiring manager being one of the most important relationships that they build, and I can't wait to talk about that in just a second. And then your compensation, it's got to be competitive for the markets that they're in, and job fit must be aligned. And those things really kind of sound simple overall. There's so many times that we see organizations that have this job description that is vague or poorly written, that doesn't really describe the job. So candidates are having a hard time understanding, is this really the right job for me? Or I read this job description, it looks great, but it's not really aligned to what the job is. It's too vague, it's not exact, it doesn't show connection to the organization overall. So getting these three things right is critical in building out what your candidate experience will be to attract the right job seekers in all of your for your organization. And you take that through the process. I just want to touch real quick on the onboarding impact. And at the beginning of any new relationship, it comes with expectations, right? So candidates evaluate the quality of that relationship they'll have with an employer based on how they're treated in the hiring process. If candidates are not shown the respect that they deserve, they're unlikely to accept your offer. And equally as important, if the onboarding process doesn't align or meet expectations during this hiring stage, employees are far more likely to leave. In relationship terms, onboarding can be considered the honeymoon period, right? When you think about those opportunities and risks to your workforce, there's significant data around the importance of this onboarding experience. And it seems to be one of the most important and highly sought after experiential moments in the new hire cycle. So you want to create great experiences for candidates, great moments overall for your employee experience. And the numbers demonstrate why. So 65% have responded that the experience they have on their first day impacts their decision to stay for 1 month. It's an amazing amount of people that say, hey, my first day is really critical. 63% responded saying that their total experience on onboarding will impact their decision to stay in the first year. So there's a ton of data around crafting a great onboarding experience. On the
Hey, Darren.
Yeah.
So a quick related question based on what you're sharing that came in. But I also wanted to make a comment because totally our data aligns with this too. And especially, well, first and foremost, the number one negative reason why candidates withdraw in our data every year, withdraw themselves, whether an offer was made or not, is because they felt like their time was disrespected, especially during the screening and interview stage. But the pre-boarding stage prior to day one is also extremely critical, and you're touching on it as well. But that from accepting offer to start date, the nurturing and engagement that happens makes a big difference. We see it in our data too. But there was a question that came in: how does recognition apply if the candidate isn't even hired yet? And it's communication and feedback, right? It's nurturing and engagement.
It is. It's being respectful of time. It's showing up timely for interview, having a hiring manager show up on time for an interview and not cancel. It is showing respect and appreciation for who they are as an individual, but also as a candidate. So you don't always think about recognition, right, as part of the pre-hire or the recruiting process. It's thought of hey, it's got a 3 years length of service award, or I've done something great in the organization, I'm getting recognition there. There are ways you can apply the concept of recognition with respect, timely responsiveness, transparency about the organization, all of those things, even talking about someone's background, and maybe they're not the right hire for, they got a great background. Acknowledging that is a great way to recognize them, which will provide, again, positive experience for those candidates overall. So you have to think about what are the touch points in your process and how can you actually apply recognition in those touch points overall. To your point, Kevin, when you look at the left-hand side here, we've seen an increase of those that would accept another offer between the time they accepted your offer and the time they started. Went up from 45% to 57%. And so 57% of the candidates have accepted an offer from you. So they would consider another offer if they weren't contacted between the time of offer accept and the first day. 19% are not sure whether they would or not. So there's 3/4 of your hires are at risk if you're not keeping in touch with them and providing a positive onboarding experience for them before they start. So totally aligning with what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Thanks, Darren.
Yep. And hopefully Daniel answered kind of your question along the way that you had in the chat with some of that. The other thing I wanted to start you, and thanks for the leading question too, Daniel, about how do you show recognition before someone's hired? One of the unique engagement moments that we create is an onboarding accelerator welcome box. And so what we found is that this welcome box that we will brand for your organization and actually send out to that new hire before they start. Like, Darren, really, you want to spend that money before they start? What if they don't start? I hear that all the time. Like, well, if you don't, they're probably not going to start. And then the thousands of dollars you just spent are going down the drain when you could have spent 30, 40, 50 bucks doing a welcome gift, right? But we've just found an amazing number of responses. 67% of respondents say that receiving some kind of company swag, that's personalized for them will influence their decision to accept and show up on the first day. And so it's really interesting that they are excited about, getting something that recognizes their good decision. So when you think about what you want to recognize, you want to recognize the things that are going to contribute back to that positive experience that person is going to have. So we've done this for a lot of different clients across the board, and the results are just outstanding. They get a welcome gift that's branded. They get a personalized note from the CEO, and it just goes straight to the person's home. It involves their family many times. It's interesting to say that, hey, I got my welcome box, but my kid took my speaker, or now my wife has my coffee mug or something like that. But we have found the data tells us that it increases the first day show rate by 67%. And virtually eliminated for one of our customers first day no-shows in their organization. Got it down to show rate was 99%, and they had a big problem beforehand. And when the focus on this onboarding that everyone began to have and that experience that they're going to have, we also saw a 42% reduction in early turnover in the first 90 days. So those are just great results that are all achieved by a focus on the candidate experience pre-hire and during the onboarding experience. And so giving recognition in the process is so important for having a great candidate experience overall. The next couple of slides, I kind of want to run through just to be cautious of our time as well, but just perceptions of recruiting that are overall out there. And so I'm going to kind of go through a couple of these real quick and then wrap things up. But when you look at this, a couple of interesting notes, right? 56% of the respondents said they expected to be working for a new employer in the next 6 months. That's kind of scary. If you think about your workforce, are 56% of them looking for a new job in the next 6 months? It's up slightly from last year, from 55%, but still about half the respondents think they may be working for a new employer in the next 6 months. 92% of just the passive job seekers are willing to learn about new opportunities. So there's a ripe opportunity for individuals that are currently working today for as recruiters for you to go talk to, because that's interesting that it's 92%. And when you look at kind of the data overall, that's actually down slightly from 97% last year, kind of, I think, reflecting the decrease in quits in the labor market. There's not as many openings that were out there. So like a couple of years ago, I think in 21, We did this survey, and 100% of the respondents said that they'd be willing to look at a new opportunity. So that was the year after that's when the Great Resignation popped up in 2022, right? We saw it coming with everyone to be interested in learning an opportunity. And then it dropped down to 89% in 23 and then kind of back up again last year. So there are people that are out there that are looking, that are interested. You got to find them and engage with them overall. And we looked at where they're looking at these jobs. What are they looking for? And Indeed still kind of rules the day when it comes to where people are finding jobs from a social media standpoint. Their dominance of SEO continues to be reflected in candidate generation sourcing results, as well as what candidates are telling us overall. Interestingly, LinkedIn actually fell from 53 down to 49% this year. And that could be the rise of skills-based recruiting, where you don't have those kind of roles on LinkedIn as much as they might not be on LinkedIn. Facebook also fell from 40% last year down to 34%. So there's still a broad array of channels that are out there. TikTok came in at 30% versus 21% last year, and Instagram is up from 29% last year to 34%. Also interesting, this year on the list, you don't see Career Builder. It did make the top 10 this year. And X, formerly known as Twitter, actually is on the list for the first time at 16%. So a lot of interesting data around where candidates are finding jobs overall and where they're finding them out there in the marketplace.
You know what's interesting about that? And then I have a question for you that actually is about the onboarding data. I want to make sure that we get to this. But it's that candidates tell us, even fewer tell us they're using Twitter and Facebook as channels for job search overall, and yet we do find that employers still invest a lot more in those social channels. I think that it's possible, but I think it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, you have more candidates probably going to Google and Indeed, right? Looking for jobs that way. Anyway, but sorry, that was a comment. Question for you is backed on the onboarding data. Do you think that it can be more volatile, especially when we're talking the difference between a remote job and an in-person job in regards to all those different touch points that you want to achieve the desired results that you're looking for? Are you finding a difference with the customers you're working with too?
Yeah, Kevin, good question. We don't find any difference between remote work versus in-person work when it comes to the onboarding impact.
Got it.
Well, we don't. The data doesn't tell us it's stronger on one side or the other.
Okay. Got it.
Yep. And I think the other thing when you talk about this and like Instagram and TikTok, whatever you're using there, I do also believe that it takes time to mature those channels around candidate generation. Right, you don't have a following on Instagram. You're not going to generate many candidates,
right?
On Instagram, right?
Well, yeah.
So it takes time on those, right? So each one of these, and again, when you think about the shift in demographics, I don't think I'll ever find a job on Instagram or TikTok because I'm not on there, and I'm not going to be looking there, right? As a boomer, I'm a boomer, right?
Right.
However, my goddaughter, my friends' kids, that's where they're going to be looking, right? And that's where they're going to be influenced. And Instagram does create a huge following for a lot of individuals that can do influencing. So I think there's an opportunity there for all of us to be more thoughtful on the Gen Z.
I agree with you. I think what we're talking about is that it's more of the initial impact is from a branding perspective that could lead to somebody that's looking for actually literally for a job. So as a branding tool, yes, when you're trying to reach different segments and audiences, I agree. Yeah.
Yep. I'm going to go to Daniel's question here. It says,
I was just going to go there next. Go ahead.
Is there data on how many people are looking for a new job while at their current job? Daniel, it was back here. Let me just jump back up. Make sure I get the number exactly right. So the 92% our passive candidates are willing to learn about a new job. Doesn't mean that they're actively looking for a new job, but they're willing to look for a new job. And then the 56% said they might be working for a new employer. So it doesn't completely answer your question about how many are actively looking for a job, right? But the ones that are currently working are certainly open to that overall. But if half or so are saying I might be working somewhere else, then you can guess that there's quite a few that are doing that.
Yeah. And you got a few others here too. You have one about for Indeed. Do you see people searching for hourly roles or salary roles more?
Yep. Thanks, Kelly. Didn't bifurcate it by that number. I think we as a recruiting organization, we see both still. On that, we see more salaried roles effectively being recruited from LinkedIn and more hourly roles being effectively recruited from Indeed. That's just the results of what we see coming in from all of our customers, but we didn't bifurcate this data that way.
He said meant physically looking while on company time.
Daniel, I don't know. I got my suspects.
So, and then you've got one. What are the job levels types for which candidates on the listings on this slide that you were showing before?
It is a free form where they can put it in themselves, so it's not stack ranked overall. Jody, yep. So it's not stack ranked. So if they found their job here, they could actually put it in. It is a list for them to choose from. So there's not a free form response, just to be clear.
Got it.
It's not stack ranked.
Right. That's odd. Maybe that's something, Joshua. I know we want you to round out, Darren, so I'm going to be quiet for the remainder until the very end now. But Joshua, somebody's saying that the slides are coming out in another language, so if you could check on that. And I'm going to let Darren finish it.
I'll upload a final version when we're done. That way, it's a little bit more clear, just in case there's some kind of translation piece on that. Okay. All right, so Tim, what I got? About 10 minutes left, is that right?
We've got right 13 minutes.
Yeah, 13 minutes.
Okay, good deal. I want to leave a little bit. I really appreciate the questions, by the way, as they're going through this. So I think that's great. So I'm gonna kind of run through the last couple of slides here and get to one of the ones I think is really the most important. But when you look at the data that's on the screen now, salary is again now 38% what people want to see in job listings versus 33% last year. So a robust job listing is still important. I think salary transparency laws are probably driving this trend up, but job seekers are also asking about benefits and appealing job descriptions and company profiles and, you know, who you are as an organization. So especially if you're not a big consumer brand or a large employer, it's really important. And even job titles still matter. And working from home is also listed here. So all of these things are important about making your job listing attractive overall to the job seekers. I want to push through a little bit of this and then get to the next slide. But I think that if you look over on the right-hand side, the 77% still very satisfied overall with the recruiting process. 40% said it should take between 15 and 29 minutes to fill out an application, the application process. And just so you know, since 2019, that's been the #1 answer and the top response overall about how long it should take. So no real substantial change there. I keep hearing that speed is king and maybe 15 minutes is really the most quick that someone could do it. Some are still talking about 5 minutes as a new benchmark, but I'm not sure on that. But it's just interesting to hear what candidates are interested in and how long that it should take. When you look at the positive experience that people had on the left-hand side, 40% had a great experience with the hiring manager, 22% with the recruiter, 18% with coordinators. So it's still important to have good relationships overall throughout the recruiting process. And that jumps me to this slide, which I want to spend just a few minutes on. So when we looked at a lot of this data on why people accept jobs and reject offers and why they leave. A lot of the data is very consistent. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight are just a couple of new items that we usually have just spoken to and the importance of relationships. In the past several years, we have seen this trend continue to build in relationships. And what's most important, individuals in the candidate sphere of the hiring process, who are the most important? In 2022, the importance of meeting with the hiring manager was at 66%. This is the person I've got to talk to was at 66%. In 23, it jumped up to 78%, as you can see there on the left-hand side. And this year, it has jumped up to 90%. So really, this is the most significant change in the entire survey. And it's not just the increase in the hiring manager, a 34% increase. HR increased by 30%, senior management increased by 30%. So I went back to Dr. White and go, hey, what is going on here? I mean, we see little changes, from year to year, but this is a big change. And his perspective is this, like in the big picture sense, when you look at the job market, it has changed so much really in the last 12 to 24 months. And no longer are companies so desperate to hire that they offer a bevy of concessions to those that they're trying to recruit. And the dynamics no longer favor employees disproportionately because the market has tightened up. So remember, a couple of years ago, it was I'm going to get a 20% raise if I leave and go somewhere else. That's just not happening anymore. So now employees can't really leave knowing that if they're going to like that new job just as much. They can't jump around as quickly and easily to one that's equally or more attractive. So they're paying much more attention to the context of the hiring company. And they want to know more about exactly what they're getting into, how the potential boss operates. What are the terms and conditions of employment? What's the vision and values of senior management? Who are the potential coworkers, and can they see themselves really getting along, with them in the workplace? And so under these new market conditions we're in 2024, employees are being much more careful about accepting the new job, and thus they want to do a lot more due diligence about that hiring company, and they want to be more informed. And the negative consequence for them in making a mistake is much more risk than them going and finding something else, as much more than ever before, right? When you think about our recent, 4 years. So it really is just been interesting to us. And you have to ask these questions, are you creating more opportunities or less opportunities in your recruiting process for interactions with these individuals, with the hiring managers, with HR, with the trainers, with senior managers, with people that are in the similar role, future coworkers? Is automation removing some of these opportunities, or is it enabling them? And I'm a huge fan of technology and a huge fan of automation, but this data made me stop in my tracks and think about what are we going to be doing about creating opportunities for these candidates who are now being much more selective before they move. There's not 4 million extra jobs out there like there were before they make the move. And so I want you to think about, as you're crafting your candidate approach, and as you're crafting, the things that you think about around the experience they're going to have and how they're going to make their decision, you've got to make sure they have opportunities to speak with these individuals overall. And then I guess last but not least, just I want to recap some of the things we've talked about as we kind of wrap it up, then I'll go back to some questions. But when you think about what's going on in the marketplace today, you've got to really overcome this depersonalization. That technology has helped employers be much more efficient, but the extent to which recruiting automation solutions have created negative perceptions among candidates continues to be a cause for concern. And employers need to humanize this hiring experience and develop strong personal relationships that help the hiring managers succeed. You've got to help them be more effective at how they do their job. You've got to let hiring managers, don't assume they know how to be effective interviewers and how to effectively engage with your high potential candidates. They're distracted and they're pressured to meet deadlines, and they've got an operations to run, right? So they just don't want to fill the jobs. Some managers are good at it, and some others need help. And then the candidate experience is the third on the top over there. Recognizing candidates' achievements, demonstrating appreciation and respect for the views expressed during the interview process, creating increased connections with those candidates. And they believe that's the most important factor on whether or not to accept a job or not. And then managing the experiences overall. There's a significant potential disconnect between what led an individual to join and their onboarding process. So celebrate offer acceptance positively reaffirms the decision that they just made. And you want to celebrate that, whether it's a phone call, a letter, a text, an onboarding gift, a visit back to the site, anything you can do to help them be recognized for their decision on coming on board, whether it's an onboarding gift or what. And then use that opportunity to optimize onboarding. Organizations need to recognize that onboarding is an investment in setting expectations and build a long-term relationship with that individual to help them succeed in the culture and get to know their coworkers and learn what's expected of them as a valued team member. If it's poorly planned and doesn't have the right connection points, you're going to lose those candidates really early on. And then last but not least is you have to address remote work preferences. Still 42% are working remote or some kind of hybrid at least 40% of the time. So don't just pull blinders down and ignore it. Address it, be open about it, talk about what the options are, and think about if there's any flexible work policies, because they're asking about those in the process overall. So overcome depersonalization, help the hiring managers, help the candidate be engaged, manage their experience, optimize your onboarding, and address remote work preferences overall will help you really create a situation where you're going to optimize the use of your candidates overall. So I'm going to jump back to the questions here real quick and see if we have any more that I didn't address.
Yeah, there was one that came in that relates to a lot of the content you shared, is about how important is knowing or having awareness of the organization's vision, mission, purpose, values, culture for the job seekers.
Yep, Karen, so let me run back to this.
I re-uploaded the slides as a PDF. Hopefully that will correct any of the issues with the readability of the slides. It was converting it into kind of some wingding. It wasn't, it's like boxes. It was like symbols or something. So anyway, hopefully that helps.
Weird. Yeah, thanks, Joshua.
Yeah, so Karen, to your question, I think it's extremely important because everything around having these relationships with hiring managers and HR and training managers and coworkers really is about cultural fit. When you think about it, at the end of the day, when you look at this slide, what you don't really see is how that impacts someone's selection. But when you think about recognition and appreciation and job fit, it really does go back to what the company's mission, vision, and values are overall. So it's still very important. That company profile, which you see there, it shows about 12%. And that's not to be minimized, I don't think, at all, because that's what's going to drive the initial outreach usually on a job that's out there. So don't discount the importance of understanding how important that it really is overall.
You know, Darren, besides just like similar to your slide here, take out benefits and salary, which is always top of mind, right? Values the past 2 years in our Candy benchmark data have been the #1 marketing content that candidates want to see, and everything else that you outlined. So it is super important to them, as is salary transparency. And that's probably the last question that we'll take. How important is it to get the candidate to initially engage?
I think it's critical. I think that it's a fine line, April, that we all have to play with most organizations, right? Don't have a static salary grid. We would love that, right? To go A is A, B is B, this experience is that. And it's just not that, the reality is not that way, right? But it is important to understand what it is. It is important to understand, what levers you can pull as a recruiter or a hiring manager on salary and be as transparent as possible. Set those expectations early and upfront with those candidates. So that is actually part of the way you show respect and recognition to those by being honest about it. So if I want $300,000 a year, but it only pays $100,000, I need to know now so we don't waste each other's time.
Yeah. And by the way, just a quick side note to that, it's only about a quarter of the candidates tell us that they are told the salary without asking for it during the process, which is, it's a lower amount, but those that are told, their willingness to refer others increases dramatically. It's one of the things that can happen. So, yeah, great.
Cool.
Well, thanks everybody. And Darren, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. It's just wonderful information, and always gobble it up every time you present. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody that joined. If you have other questions or need more information, just reach out to me. I'd be happy to help out.
Thanks, Joshua.
Thank you, everyone.